The next thing you're going to do is, now that you have your stirrup into your tumbler, is you're going to put your sear spring on. And the sear spring has a little groove, or the trigger plate has a little groove, and this has a little tab that sticks out. And that little tab rests into that groove. Okay? Which then also pivots on your sear. Okay? So your sear goes into place like this. Put grease on that, make sure that see that right there. There we go. Right. Now this is the tricky part. What I like to do, there are 4 screws that come out of this trigger plate that are right here. You can see. The shorter, fatter one, well, they're all the same width, but the shorter one of the 4 screws is the one that goes back into your sear spring. Okay? How I like to do this is pretty simple. I screw the sear spring in first. Once I get it pretty close to snug, then what I'll do is I'll snap that into place, like so, and then I'll finish screwing that into place. And I'll cinch it down. And that popped out. It's no big deal. It happens. You've got to give it enough play so you can move it into that spot. Okay, now that they're in place, put your thumb over that. You need to be careful when you take this apart too, because if you don't, what will happen is that will fly all over the place. So, there's your sear. Should work like such. Good. Okay. The next part that we're going to put on, and the reason I put this on is just merely for safety reasons, to make sure that your entire tumbler doesn't fly off when you're doing this. So we're going to put on the bridle, which is this little piece right here. There are 3 screws that go through this, and there are 2 hinge pins that go in this. So it fits one way only. So if you jack it up, you'll know right away. Alright, fit in there, but let me put a little. So those pins have to rotate in there, so you don't want it to rotate on the bare metal. And then what I do when I'm done is I wipe off all the spare grease, usually with a toothbrush. So, all right. What I will do now is I'll put one of the screws in there just to kind of hold it in place. you'll see that it'll go all the way through the trigger plate right there. Alright. Now the next part is the most complicated and probably the most dangerous. So our job now is to hook our main spring, which is this, that has a tit in here that is drilled into this spring stock. You can see right there. On this gun in particular that I was working on, when I had taken it apart, it had some wobble, and I thought initially I could drill this out, but I've talked to one of the foremost experts on this, and he said you can't drill out that spring stock. It will ruin the spring. And so that gentleman's name was David Nobles. He's a co-writer of a book called the Remington Double Gun with Charlie Semmers and a couple other guys. So how I do this is this. There's a flat tab that's up here that's been machined out. What I like to do is very simply, you want to compress the top and the bottom of the spring together. So once they're compressed fully together like that, what you do is you hook the end of that. Oops. You hook the end of your mainspring on, slide it up into place. Make sure this little teat is in that hole. If not, you'll snap it right off. And then slowly release it. And there you go. The next step is to put the last couple of screws in. If you're going to do this work yourself, if you're watching this, you probably already have one of these guns, and you know that parts for these things were all hand fitted to each one of the guns. And so you can't just go to Walmart or Brownells or anywhere else and just find these parts. So I have found a person who has these. So you had to, when I got this other new mainspring, I had to retrofit it and grind it down and sand it down by hand to make sure that they fit. Alright, so now we're ready for the last part. So you'll see that all the holes are filled in this gun, with the exception of the main screw that holds the trigger plates onto the assembly. Okay, last piece is the hammer. Okay, so this little tab right here, this is the left side, like I had said earlier. This goes into the receiver, and so the hammer should actually look something like this. And they're going to go on there a little, oops. And again, all this grease that I'm putting on here, this is your standard lube right, and that can easily be wiped off. We want to tighten this down before doing a test fire. And when dry firing these, just make sure that you catch the hammer. You don't want to slam it because chances are you could bust something, and like I said, parts for these are not very easy. So you make sure you cock it. And then this is back here, that's the sear, and so to release that, just do it. Yep, everything works great. And that's how you put together the entire firing assembly on a Remington 1889.